Hello, listeners. Sean here. Before we get to the discussion, I wanted to give a quick heads up that we had a few hiccups throughout this recording. I edited it the best I could, but there are still just a very few moments where the audio may slow down and or maybe get a bit choppy. However, I promise that it doesn't impede or interfere with the enjoyment of the conversation as we discuss these two cinematic classics. Also, at the end of the episode, I'll be once again playing the song It's On by Matthew Reese. Seeing as how one of the films ends with this song, as well as the fact that the song was performed by the film's lead star and producer, I felt it was fitting to play it at the end. So, with that out of the way, on to the conversation.
Who is the most underrated actor of all time?
It's Dolph Lundgren.
Correct. Why?
Well, because of his spiky hair and his ice-cold demeanor and his big muscles.
Absolutely.
I must break you. The guilty will be punished.
My name is Sergeant Andrew Scott.
Come on, guys, don't do this. If I don't get breakfast, I get real grumpy. I don't think you like me grumpy. And you go in pieces, asshole.
Let's kick some ass.
Hello and welcome back to I Must Break, this podcast, the fan podcast looking at the cinematic career of action legend Dolph Lundgren. Today, we're going back to 2015 and 2017 and discussing two films, both involving Dolph infiltrating the prison system, 2015's Riot and 2017's Larceny. I'm your host, Sean, and joining me once again today is my buddy and show regular, Chris Prentice. Chris, thanks for coming back, man.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sean. I appreciate it. I'm excited to delve into these two classics.
Well, it was, it's interesting because after our last discussion, when we discussed the Giorgio Serafini trifecta, as I keep saying, you keep, we've been talking back and forth, and you were like, Sean, please, when can I come back for another combo episode? Please, please. And finally, I eventually just had to succumb to it, and I said, okay, fine, Chris. Here you go. Here are the two films.
Oh, you really served up a couple stellar picks for me. I know, you thought maybe you'd have me on for Skin Trade, but no, that just wasn't what you had in the cards for me. So I'm really excited to be talking about one film that I think is decent in Riot, and then one that's really not that decent in Larceny.
Well, and actually, I should probably let the listeners know, you actually came up with this idea, so I want to give you full credit for it. But, back when, I want to say this is a couple years ago, actually, but you and I came up with the idea where you said, you may have to do some combo episodes because it doesn't really make sense to do a full-on, I guess some could look at it and say, oh no, a film like Larceny deserves a full-on singular podcast episode. But I don't really subscribe to that opinion. And so, yeah, films like this, okay, that we're going to be discussing today, it kind of, like I said, you came up with that idea, you broached that idea with me, and I think it's a wonderful execution plan where, yeah, we get to discuss two films that came in the wake of the Expendables, as I like to say. And I keep saying this on the show, and I'll reiterate it again. I'll try to make it very brief this time. But yeah, in the wake of the Expendables, I'd say even after 2012, okay, Dolph, he just kept putting out film after film after film. And a lot of these films, kind of like the ones that we're looking at today, were, you could say that they're paycheck jobs, but in the end, I think Dolph is being treated, as are many actors in the direct-to-video genre, but I think it's very clear with these particular films that Dolph is being treated as more or less a commodity. And by that I mean he is a commodity. He is a product, if you will, that these producers can essentially buy and, have him on screen for maybe 10, 12 minutes. Larceny, he gets a little bit more time. But yeah, he's a commodity that producers can put on screen and sell the film as a Dolph Lundgren vehicle when in reality, he's really not on screen that much. And what we have as far as a final product at the end of the day is really, really shabby and really, really cheap.
No, there's no doubt about it. I mean, that's kind of become par for the course with the majority of the movies that he makes and the majority of the movies that a lot of these guys make. I mean, Stallone has done it, obviously. Bruce Willis has done it a ton of times, where it's you put up a recognizable name on the video box art or now the streaming summary art, and you get people interested because of that name, and then you watch it and you kind of realize, wait a minute, this isn't quite a Dolph Lundgren movie. And though it's odd that I think, at least with the two that we're talking about, it's the one where he's not in it quite as much, to me, is clearly better than the one that he is the star of. So that's kind of an odd situation. But that's happened plenty of times with these action guys in recent years. It's you can call it bait and switch, but it's just kind of the reality of the market right now is, these guys are older. They're not going to be doing as much heavy lifting on a lot of these movies. So they're going to take the paycheck to be on set for a few days, do a few scenes where they're not really straining themselves too much. And that's all she wrote.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about this is, I mean, I was going back as we were kind of prepping for this, and especially after our last conversation when we looked at the triple threat of films, Blood of Redemption, Ambushed, and Puncture Wounds. It's interesting. You look at some of these films and you think, is this the low point in Dolph's career? Okay, are these the absolute worst films in Dolph's career? And, I will, as I was thinking about that question, I don't know where you stand on this, but I still, in my opinion, would say that the films that Mr. Lundgren did from the late 90s, early 2000s, so we're looking at The Last Warrior, we're looking at Agent Red, obviously, okay, those films. Jill the Ripper, I know that, there are some things going with Jill the Ripper, but I really didn't see much of note. And I still, in my humble opinion, would still put those as the low point. And I'll tell you why. Because I think with those particular films, there was still money being put toward the production. Okay, those films were made at a time when direct-to-video action films, you still had a few diamonds in the rough. You still had some good films. Yeah, you had some junk here or there, but you still had some good products. These films, I don't know if it's. I mean, we're of course going to be ragging on these particular pictures. I'll just say that right now. But I don't know if it's entirely fair to say that these are the low point when in reality, this is just the state of the market. Okay, Dolph is a working actor. He's a working guy. Okay, and he's essentially working with what he has been given. And of course, yes, we'd love to have a skin trade. We'd love to have a Creed 2 or an Aquaman. I'm sure he would as well. But in the end, those opportunities are so few and far between. And so what we're looking at here is pretty much not just in Dolph's career, but the state of the market. I don't know if you would agree with any of those things that I said, but do you see what I'm saying? Would you consider these lower than that late 90s, early 2000s period?
Oh, in my opinion, yeah. These films are much lower. At least when he was making stuff like The Last Warrior and Jill the Ripper and Agent Red. I mean, they were terrible, but there wasn't really a lie in them. He was the star. They were his movies. They were
and
bad.
They looked like movies. Sorry to interrupt you, but true. They looked like movies.
No, you're right. And they looked like movies. I mean, what the bulk of the ones that he's done, in the last 10 years, with a couple of exceptions, like you mentioned, it's just they're not even. They barely seem like movies. You watch something like Larceny, and you're just kind of like, well, what the hell is this? I mean, the first thing is that. The first thing you have to ask yourself is, okay, well, here's this new action movie with Dolph Lundgren. Is there any action in it? like that's kind of what you have to ask now, which is pretty pathetic. That's the first thing with any of these movies is there actually any action in any of these movies? Because by and large, in a lot of them, there really isn't that much. And
no,
and then
they can't afford it.
No, I know. I mean, they're making these things in 15 days, and I mean, you're not going to get anything that's interesting. I mean, that's why it's kind of a miracle that Castle Falls turned out somewhat okay and was at least an entertaining movie, because that's another one that was a seriously fast shoot under some kind of odd circumstances. But I mean, I'll give him credit. I mean, he actually made a movie that you can watch from start to finish and be entertained by. But a lot of the ones that he has signed on for in the last 10 years, it's clear that, they're just paychecks. And I don't begrudge him that. I mean, there's only so many actors that can really put together the projects that they want to do 100% and that they have power over. And there's just not that many of those guys that can do that. I mean, it's Tom Cruise, it's Tom Hanks, it's Denzel, and not that many more. So when you get down to the pecking order of where Dolph is, I mean, sometimes he's just got they've got a go picture. They want me on set for a week. They've got the rate that I'm charging. I'm gonna go do it.
Well, and I think the other thing that needs to be considered and looked at here is, I think, look, I'm not going to speculate on where Mr. Lundgren is in terms of finances. That's not my place. But I think with a guy like him, I think he still has fire in him. He still enjoys the craft of acting. He still enjoys playing new characters. And if you look at a celebrity like Mr. Jean-Claude Van Damme, I mean, I've been saying it on the show for a long time. You and I have discussed this, but I look at Jean-Claude as essentially being semi-retired. Okay, and I think a lot of that is because, number one, throughout the 90s, I think he was pretty wise with his money. I think some would argue differently due to his drug abuse problems that he had. But I mean, I think he is financially at a pretty good place where maybe he doesn't need to work. And I feel like a guy like Jean-Claude also looks at these type of productions and kind of views them as being a little bit beneath him. Okay. And we discussed this when we were looking at, I think it was The Defender. But if you look at, these projects nowadays that are being put together for barely $1 million, maybe $2 million, of course, an actor who was once at one time starring in films that were being made for between 30 to 55 million, yeah, they're not going to want to show up for something like that. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we don't see as much of Jean-Claude anymore. I think he also kind of lost his fire a long time ago. I also feel like Kurt Russell is another actor. I mean, I feel like if Kurt Russell really wanted to, I think these are the type of productions that we be seeing him in, and I think he's a gentleman who he's kind of like, look, I don't need to sink to those levels. I'm okay being remembered for the big hits, if you will, and I'm okay stepping away. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So definitely, I agree with you when it comes to Kurt Russell. Though I think he did do one of these kind of movies, a few years ago. I think it was called Crypto.
Crypto, yes.
That. Yeah, there was something like that. So it's not like he's 100% above it, but yeah, in general, he's kind of been in semi-retirement. It's like, if somebody comes to him with a good project, something that's worth him getting off of the golf course, then he'll do it. But he's definitely not scrambling, trying to fill up his schedule all the time with a new movie. And like you said, it's like the same thing with Van Damme. It's a semi-retirement. If some kind of project comes together that's worth their time and is going to pay them what they think that they're due, they're going to do it. But for the most part, they're not really like where Dolph is at, or Frank Grillo, or guys like that who Grillo's kind of to the extreme, but guys who are just basically going after as many different films as they can, no matter what the quality is.
Oh, most definitely. Well, if we look at this particular pairing, okay, this is the second of our combo episodes, we can say. I decided on these two particular films because I feel like they're very similar in certain respects. Okay, this pairing I felt makes the most sense because, as we stated earlier, both of these are two very, very, very low budget productions, but they were both filmed within a 2-year period, and they both have Dolph playing a character who must enter a prison. Okay, in Larceny, he is entering a prison to I guess we can say see a goal at the end, so that he can achieve a goal. And then in Riot, he is also going undercover in a prison to also achieve a goal. We will say that's about where the similarities end there, though.
Yeah, that's pretty much the end of the comparisons. I mean, Riot is one that's basically being sold as a Dolph movie, but isn't quite the case. And then you have Larceny, which is sold as a Dolph movie, and it is, but it's terrible. So it's kind of pick your poison. I think really Riot is a much better movie than Larceny, despite the fact that you're getting way more of Dolph and Larceny. And I'm sure as we talk about them both, I'll kind of get into the reasons why I think that way.
Well, excellent segue. I'll let you pick. Okay, I'll let you pick which one you'd rather discuss first. Do you want to end on a slightly more positive note and end with Riot, or would you like to save our ribbing for the end and go with Larceny? I'll let you pick. You have control of the show here at this moment.
Oh my goodness, this is way too much responsibility than I'm used to.
It's a real Sophie's choice, I know.
Oh my God, let's take our punishment first, and let's go ahead and let's start on Larceny.
Okay, all right. So we're going to look at Larceny. I'm actually going to read 2 synopses for Larceny. Okay, one is the one that I wrote, and then the other is the one that is on IMDb. Okay, so all right. So if we look at Larceny, in Larceny, Dolph plays Jack, a thief who's hired by the CIA to break into a Mexican prison and steal the secret stash of cash belonging to a cartel drug lord.
I care to make a comment about the border wall proposal. The wall between the U.S. and Mexico will go a long way in keeping the criminal element and the drugs out of our country. What is the DEA doing down here? Because I do not see us winning this war on drugs.
As a matter of fact, we have a couple things in motion. Your big plan was to rip off one of the Capitan's men?
Seemed like a good place to start.
Do you know what you're doing?
We're stealing from the most notorious drug lord on the planet. You said no one dies here.
I never claimed to be a good guy.
If you take my money, there is no mercy. No way out. You're dead.
Here is the synopsis, actually, for Grins. I thought this would be funny. Here is the synopsis that is on IMDb, Chris. A team of thieves break into a maximum secured Mexican prison with a plan to rob the most notorious drug lord, full of action, gun smoking, fighting, and corrupt politicians.
Oh, yes. Corrupt politicians. Who doesn't enjoy watching their, low budget action movies full of corrupt politicians and little digs at different sides of the aisle, we'll say.
This one, I will say right now, I don't know if you felt this way, but I would say out of all of the films in Dolph's extensive CV, this film could be probably the strangest anomaly, I think, in so many ways. And I think a lot of that is due to the rollout. Okay, the final product that we were given, this has never really even had an official release. I think we can say there's a lot of things about this film that almost feel like a lost film in some ways. There's a lot of aspects about this that even feel like a completed movie. And what's so sad about that is this is one of my first points I was going to get to. I don't know if you felt this way or not, but I feel like this is a cool premise. I'm just going to say that right now. I think on its surface, okay, had this film had a proper budget, okay, maybe more shooting days, maybe more resources at its disposal, I think this is a cool premise that really has legs. The idea of a thief who breaks into a Mexican prison to steal the cash that belongs to a drug lord. So he's also, not only is he mixing it up with the inmates, but he's also kind of planning this very high-tech heist, if you will. I think that is a really cool premise, but oh boy, did what we get is nothing exciting at all, is it?
No. I mean, the premise that you explained, that sounds all good. I like action movies set in prisons. I can think of several that I've enjoyed, but I mean, there's just absolutely nothing of note going on in this movie. It's just so low rent. There's no choreography at all with any of the quote-unquote action. So many of the supporting actors are just really bad in this. And, it's an inert movie. I mean, it just does not... So many scenes just sit there, and there's just nothing. There's no energy at all to anything going on. I mean, it's really one of Dolph's worst, and I can see why it didn't get a formal release in the States, because who's going to watch this and say, oh yeah, we got to start pressing the DVDs for this right away.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wild to think. I mean, even Lionsgate. Okay, even Lionsgate turned this one down, which is really saying something, because Lionsgate will pick up just about anything to turn some kind of a quick profit on it. But even they didn't do this one. And so it's really weird. You watch this film, especially in the opening title sequence, and there's no distribution on this one at all. I think in some markets and some territories around the world, it did get an official physical release, but at least here, okay, in the United States, not available on DVD. For a good while, it wasn't even available to stream anywhere. I think Netflix had it for a very brief period, but then from there, they don't have it anymore. And what's crazy about it, you can seek it out. So anyone who is listening to this and wants to watch it, it is available on Tubi and Freevee. Those are two free streaming apps, we can say. But you cannot rent this anywhere. You cannot buy it digitally to stream. I mean, it's one of those films that's just kind of, it almost feels like it was just kind of given to Freevee and Tubi to kind of give them content. But other than that, you really can't find this film anywhere.
Yeah, I'm sure that this was a movie that was part of some kind of package deal. Somebody who has the rights to this, basically got some kind of a payment from Freevee for Larceny and for several other low budget movies, probably by this same director, I would imagine, because I did notice that I noticed that some of his other movies are also up on Freevee. So I have a feeling that Larceny was offered as some kind of package deal to these free streaming sites who, they're just looking for as much content as possible. So that's kind of where we're at now with these streaming wars. Everybody's just trying to build as much of a library as they can. And, if it ends up including a movie of this quality, then hey, so be it.
Well, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with this one, to be perfectly honest. I mean, like I said already, I mean, it feels in so many ways like a lost film. It almost feels like like an ash can copy of a movie that wasn't meant to be released. Remember the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie that we were not supposed to see, but that is available for a while before YouTube. It was available at comic book conventions and bootlegs or whatever. That is exactly what this feels like. And the entire thing, I don't know if you felt this way or not, this feels so very incomplete. I mean, the sound mixing is way off in a number of scenes. The fight choreography is very, very shoddy. Almost feels like B-roll footage. There are scenes of dialogue that just go on and on and on with long pauses in an attempt to kind of fill the 90-minute running time, which as is, the film isn't even barely able to do. And the other thing that I picked up on, and I don't know if this is something else that you noticed, but the opening title sequence of this is very, very telling. Because what you get, I mean, it's stylistically, I guess it looks kind of cool. You get these infrared shots of what we can assume to be Mexico. We have some generic rap score that's playing. But what's wild about this is how over the title sequence, it's just the actors being listed. There is no director of photography. There is no producing team. None of that, which kind of leads me to believe that this film really didn't have many working behind the scenes.
It just seems like no effort went into this production at all. Everything was done on the cheap. The actors that were found, I mean, are even half the people in this movie, are they actually actors by trade?
No.
Or are they just people that just showed up and that was the end of it, and that was the audition process? If do you have a pulse? Okay, here's a security guard outfit and have at it. It's just so badly done. And even just the story, I mean, the story is, you would think it's just a pretty basic story. Guys are trying to rip off a drug dealer. Okay, we've seen that hundreds of times. Doesn't mean it's going to be bad, but just make it somewhat exciting. And there's just absolutely no excitement at all throughout any of this movie. I can't think of one moment in this movie where you're like, oh my God, that was kind of cool. There's nothing at all.
Well, what's interesting is, I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier about these films being such low budgets, my friend Brenton, who's been on quite a few of the episodes, he used this term with me, so I'm going to give him credit for it. But he says these films nowadays almost feel like they're mercenary jobs. Okay. And by that, I think he means, nowadays the mentality is, okay, we're going to put a certain amount of money into this film, and then if we can get our budget back from pre-sales, then we're going to walk away and it's deemed a success. Whereas I feel like back in the early 2000s, yes, the idea was, of course, to get the budget back. But then you also kind of wanted to get a little bit more on the back end. There was a little bit more effort. But I feel like when you're going into it nowadays with the mentality and the understanding of, hey, it's essentially going to a roulette table, putting $10 down, and then getting your $10 back. And so when you're going into it with that mentality and that mindset, it's a mercenary job. It's, look, the orders are very clear. Get the job done, deliver a product that is complete with a razor thin line of any kind of creativity, style, anything like that. It's just, you're the director, sure, get the job done and in the can.
Yeah, the margins are super thin. It's basically, you start out saying, here, we have Dolph Lundgren, we have a prison location that we can use, we've got 3 weeks, let's just churn out the best thing that we can. And that's exactly what you get. And beyond that, just if we're looking at just Dolph in the movie, I mean, I gotta believe that this is one of the last films he did before he had his hip replacement surgeries, because he's just moving so badly in this movie, and
he's so thin too. Did you notice that he's very, very thin?
Yeah. Well, it's like the artwork that's available. He's extremely large, and probably looking maybe he looked that way back in the late 80s, but they've got him looking way bigger than he is actually now, or even was in 2017. And when you actually watch the movie, it's just he's very thin, and he's not moving around very well. And I just think everything, but even if he was moving around great, they wouldn't have taken advantage of it. I mean, the fight scenes would have been just as poor, and any action involving him would have been just as bad. So I'm not even sure it would have made much of a difference, to be honest.
You're talking the cover art where it's Dolph's head on what I am 100% convinced is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's body from Fast 5, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Yeah. That's I mean, that's got to be where they took it from, because he hasn't really been that bulked up in a very, very, very long time.
Well, if we just run through the film, I mean, we're going to get through this as painlessly as possible, Chris, I promise.
No problem.
But if we just look at this, like I said, the opening title sequence, like I said, all we get is the cast, okay? No one else behind the scenes is listed. Interestingly, Dolph's buddy James Chalk gets a credit in the opening title sequence, despite playing a reporter who gets 2 whole scenes in the film. That's it. He shows up for 2 scenes, yet he gets his name in the opening titles. So,
hey, at least I believed him in his role. That's more than I can say for many of the people in this thing.
Well, in the opening scenes of this film, they're of Dolph in a restaurant bar. He's pretending to be drunk. He purposely gets himself arrested so that he can conveniently get thrown into the Mexican prison where the stash of money belonging to this drug lord is hidden. And so what the film promptly does, and conveniently, I should say as well, Chris, the film puts him in this maximum security prison that has maybe only, what would you say, 12 inmates, I guess? And they also apparently lack a warden.
Well, what's funny is that when they send Dolph to the prison, they really kind of hype it up as, oh, you're going to the cage. You're going, it's, oh my God, this is the worst place you could possibly be sent. And then it's like he goes there, there's no staff. There's really nobody around. No. It seemed like if you have to be thrown into a prison, that this would be kind of an ideal one.
This would be the one to go.
Because there's really nothing preventing anyone from escaping, or anyone from trying to rip off $50 million that's in a safe in the prison. Everything kind of goes somewhat easy.
Well, the reason for that is I think this production was so tightly confined, if you will, in terms of its budget, in terms of its shooting days, that they just simply did not have the resources to cast any other extras. And so I guess, I don't know if they thought that we were going to notice these things or if they even cared about it. But yeah, it's interesting. Once Dolph is thrown in the prison, we get one scene of him mixing it up amongst the prisoners. And then from there, he pretty much just gets to leave his cell. He teams up with his team of hackers and thieves. He's able to get them in the prison so that they can start knocking down the door to the to where the safe is, okay? But at that point, you almost forget that he's in a prison. I mean, and so it begs the question, why set this in a prison if they're not going to do anything with that? Wouldn't it have just been more cost-effective and economical to make this maybe some nondescript warehouse or something?
I mean, I think they had access to maybe an old prison, and because they had that location, that they were... That's why they were able to film, and it just kind of comes down to that. I mean, it's all about, hey, what can we do? Where can we film cheap? And, where can we make use for these, 17 or 18 days of filming? And that's why we end up with this location, which, yeah, like you said, it's just, it looks like there's maybe 12 inmates in this place.
So, yeah, once Dolph teams up with his team, he quickly ditches his prison clothes. He puts on a guard uniform, starts strutting the halls of the prison. Absolutely no one is the wiser that apparently this former prisoner, if you will, is now a guard. Yeah.
None of it makes any sense at all. Like, there's I don't even really understand why he needed to pose as a guard. Like, what's the reason for it?
No. And I mean, and you and I were texting about this earlier today, but Dolph's team of thieves consists of 3 others. So we have his right hand gal, if you will, is Jocelyn Osorio, reuniting from Safe. Boy, oh boy, I can imagine that that Dolph and Jocelyn sure had some stories about those days.
Do you think Dolph even remembered her from working on her was Safe? I don't think so.
I guess in this film they're dating each other, yet they never romantically embrace in any kind of way. They seem more like buddies, if you will, but apparently they're an item. There's another member to the team, this big hulking guy who's cleverly named Tank, who we know from the get-go is bad. So his turn at the end of the movie, spoiler, but his turn at the end isn't surprising in the least, which also begs the question, okay, if Dolph was enlisted by the CIA to break into this prison and get this safe, couldn't Dolph or the CIA or someone done more thorough background checks with who he's going to be teaming up with?
Hey, Corbin Burnson dropped the ball. There's really no other way to describe it. That was his job, was to make sure that Dolph had only the best operatives working with him. So I blame that squarely on Corbin Burnson.
Yeah, Corbin Burnson, who filmed all of his scenes, I'd say, over the course of 3 hours from a hotel room, it appears like, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, he does get shot. So that, he did have to go outside for that because, he does get dispatched. Again, sorry for the spoilers.
Well, and I mean, it's not a big surprise, but Dolph, his character, he's a former Marine. It's also questionable if he's a member of the DEA or not. I don't know. But yeah, he's hired by the CIA, like we said, to get this cash. Louis Mandylor also shows up. Louis Mandylor, who is he's a regular in these type of films. He shows up as a conservative senator who wants to build a wall between the U.S. and Mexico. Gee, I wonder who this is paralleling. I don't know. Who is this?
Louis Mandylor, who's normally very good. I've enjoyed a lot of his movies. He's always, usually, even if the movie's bad, is a solid presence, but he really has nothing to offer in this one. I don't know. I guess he's trying to do a Texas accent, I guess. But it doesn't come off very well. But I definitely did enjoy, when he's going to get his comeuppance and he proclaims, "I'm a conservative Republican," as if
he's trying.
He's trying.
Yeah, he's trying.
He's doing the most that he can with what he's got. But I thought that was pretty funny. I don't know whoever, when they're facing their near certain death, proclaims, what side of the political fence they're on. I don't think, has anyone ever done that before they believe they're about to be murdered. But I don't know. He's a good actor who's unfortunately stuck in a really bad movie.
Well, and we already talked about this as well, but I don't want to let this part go either. There are just some long, drawn-out scenes of dialogue, and there is one scene in particular that was just absolutely nails on a chalkboard grating for me. Okay, it's basically the drug lord, the main villain in the film, the drug lord. He gets tipped off that his stash is being robbed from the prison. Okay, we get tons of scenes of him where he's on the phone or where he's talking to his wife. But there's one unintentionally hilarious scene. So what this film is doing basically is it's trying to be like Heat, if you will, or it's trying to be something bigger than it is, because what it's doing is it's given us the scene where our main bad guy, if you will, is on to the fact that one of the members of his team is not who he says he is. And so we get this scene where he's snuffing out this person. So this is a member on his security detail, basically. And so I guess this person works for the CIA. And so this cartel leader, he's tipped off to this. So what we get is just a long scene where he's basically trying to intimidate him and telling him that he knows who he really is and that he needs to accept his death like a man and do it with dignity. But what is absolutely hilarious about the scene is the actor, and I didn't get his name because I didn't really feel the need to, but the actor who is playing this security agent or whatever, he doesn't look scared or intimidated in the least. He's just listening, and it almost feels like they just picked this guy up off the street, and he doesn't even know that he's in a movie.
Yeah. Well, both of these actors, I kind of recognize from trailers of movies done by this same director, this R. Ellis Frazier. So both of them I know are kind of like in his stable of actors. But yeah, you've got the head drug lord, the Capitan, who is, basically determine whether, or he actually knows that this. And it's the guy that he like just hired. There's like one scene previous where they just hire him to become part of his security detail, and then it's like the next scene is where we find out, oh, he's a rat. It's like, how much damage could he have done? They pretty much just hired him. I don't even know what really he would have been able to do, but whatever. But yeah, it's just such a bad scene, and yeah, it's like the movie is trying to have this profound moment, and it's really like, oh, we're gonna show you some real acting in this scene right here. This is gonna knock your socks off, and it just goes on forever. It's almost like it was done because maybe they only had about 85 minutes worth of a movie, and so they needed one extra minute. So it was just ramble, just go on, just keep saying whatever comes to your head, and we'll leave it in there because it's so bad.
The cardinal sin, I will say, the cardinal sin with this particular scene is the fact that we never see this character get killed, basically. I mean, you would think in a typical scene like this, okay, you have the drug lord saying, hey, I'm on to you, okay, accept your death like a man, bang, okay, and then it cuts to the next scene. We don't see that, and then we find out off screen through a line of dialogue that he was killed. That this CIA turncoat or whatever was killed. And so it's kind of like, what?
Yeah.
You're going to have a 5-minute long scene where he's talking to this guy about his upbringing in the Navy and everything, saying, I know who you are, and then we're not going to get any of that.
No, it's of many numerous issues as to why this is a bad movie, and I don't understand why a scene like that is even in this movie. I understand having scenes where a turncoat is exposed, and okay, we're gonna kill him, or we're gonna torture him, and that's okay, I get all that, but my God, it's just so boring. I mean, that's just kind of what you can sum the whole movie up is just boring. Whenever there is action, it's done boring. The dialogue is boring. There's just never a moment in this movie where you kind of snap to attention and think, oh, okay, now it's gonna get good. It never comes about.
Yeah, I mean, this film, everything about it almost feels like complete amateur hour. I mean, Dolph appears extremely bored, and it being only 84 minutes, I mean, this film is barely 84 minutes. Like you said, yeah, it's completely dull. I will say I haven't had the opportunity to speak with R. Ellis Frazier. That was the director on this one. I haven't had a chance to speak with him yet for the podcast, but I will say that there are some really interesting camera shots in this film, namely with the drug lord character. There are some scenes that he employs some really interesting camera work where like the sunset is creating silhouettes of the characters as they're engaged in these inane conversations, you know what I mean? And so I will give him some credit there, is that some of those shots do look pretty. Despite the fact that there's nothing happening, he does know a pretty shot.
I mean, I'll say this is, the guy has been making a lot of movies over the last 10 to 15 years. So, I mean, he knows this business, and I've actually seen interviews with him on YouTube before where he explains a lot about the business of making these sort of movies, and that's kind of interesting. I'm sure he'd love to have bigger budgets and more time to film, and maybe that would improve. Not even maybe, it would improve these movies, but I just think the end product here, it's despite a few maybe decent outside shots, it's just such a dull movie.
Well, if we just go to the end of it real quick, the prisoners do escape at the end of this film. Again, no warden ever appears present in this film, so it's a prison that that is completely free for all. Yeah. One group of prisoners commandeers a prison bus where they meet up with Mandalore's crooked senator character. They exact justice on him. Spoiler, but I guess he's in cahoots with the drug lord. Not a huge surprise there. The Capitan, excuse me. There is another scene that just I don't know about you, but I was dying with laughter at. So there are a group of prisoners who are able to sneak into the Capitan's home and set him straight, yet no attention or details are given to how they were able to enter his house undetected especially by his wife. And it's one of those scenes that just looks so ugly and amateurish. So we have the Capitan, he's up in his office or whatever, on his phone. And then suddenly a group of prisoners just suddenly walk into his room. And it's like, what is this?
Well, I think what I love about that group of prisoners that essentially help Dolph at the end of the movie is he makes a deal with them to let them go, which they willingly do. And so there are these killers that the Capitan sends. They're only described as quote unquote international assassins, as when they're after you, there's no way international assassins are after you. So they have this big build-up. These international assassins come to the prison, and then it's like 3 seconds later, they're just shot by all these inmates that are now working with Dolph. I mean, it's just, everything is just so anticlimactic. I don't understand it at all.
Well, I mean, and the film does end. Okay, so we just look at the ending real quick. The film ends where Dolph and his remaining 2 members of the team that he assembled, they decide not to leave with any money, and they just decide, I guess, to go off to their next assignment. Where exactly their next assignment is, I have no idea. What exactly Dolph's job was and why he was contracted by the CIA is, again, never even mentioned. I guess the film doesn't want to go into any details on that. What's also interesting, I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but if he's supposed to be a crack thief, this is never shown either. Okay, I just think it's interesting. They chose this former Marine, if you will, to orchestrate this heist. Yet it's never given any detail on why he's the guy who can do this. What's really sad about this, okay, is at its surface, okay, we have a heist movie that takes place in a prison, and I don't know if you picked up on this, but all Dolph does in this film is he just walks the corridors of the prison. He will radio back to his girlfriend to make sure that they're on schedule. And that is about it. I mean, that is for the 80 minutes of the movie. That is what we get.
Yeah, that is the movie, basically. I mean, we do get a great, quote unquote, great fight scene with Tank, where finally Dolph and Tank go at it. I'll tell you, this is a piece of advice to people. If you're ever watching one of these movies and they're just, you're watching them on Netflix or you're watching them on Prime or whatever, and, you're watching one of these action movies and they're just kind of dull. If you want to make them a little more entertaining, put on the subtitles, because sometimes you'll catch dialogue that you probably wouldn't have been paying attention to, and sometimes things will pop up at you if you can see the dialogue. And there's this one bit where he's fighting this guy Tank, big giant dude, and Dolph throws a few punches at him. And Tank just has this line, and all he just says is, "Where'd you learn to fight? The Peace Corps?" It's just that's probably my favorite. My favorite moment in the movie is probably that line. So that would be my advice: is if you do ever decide to watch Larceny, just put on the subtitles. So at least you can also read the drivel that's being spoken.
Well, I don't know if you did this or not either, but I was kind of interested to kind of go to the very end of this film, okay? Because like I said, it's barely 85 minutes, okay? So I wanted to see if it did hit that 90-minute mark. The closing credits to this film, Chris, are barely 3 minutes. And I think that right there just makes it abundantly clear that this thing was shot so cheaply that they, again, like I said earlier, they didn't have much crew working on this film. Okay, they really didn't, and I think that's very evident just by the abnormally short runtime of the credits, even.
Which, I mean, it's kind of odd that they would have the credits be that short, because that's one of the tricks to low budget filmmaking is, if you have a movie that's a little short and a little bit under the 90 minutes, you go to the Predator style credits of actually showing the people. You show the actors with their names and their character names, and that's a way that you can kind of juice an extra 30 seconds, 45 seconds out of it, is if you go with the old Predator credits. So the fact that they couldn't even spend the money to do that, to just pad it out a little bit, I mean, that's a fail on low budget filmmaking 101.
Well, okay. Before we get to Riot, okay, Chris, thank you again for sitting through this film. This is number 2 for you, right? Was this your second time sitting through this one?
This was my second time. Might as well have been my first time because I remembered absolutely nothing from the first time that I'd seen it. So technically, yeah, it was the second time. So bless you for letting me visit this one once again.
Hey, no problem. It's what I do. It's what I do. Okay, well let's go to let's go to the better one. Okay, so we're going to look at the Dolph in prison double feature that we did. Let's go to the other one. Okay, so this one is Riot. Okay, in Riot. Okay, and again, I have two synopses that I'll be reading because I have the one that I wrote, and then the one that is on IMDb is equally as funny as the one for Larceny. So I'm gonna read them both. In Riot, actor, producer, and music superstar Matthew Reese takes the lead as Jack Stone, a former cop who seeks revenge on the Russian mob boss who had his wife killed by purposely landing himself in the same prison that the gangster controls. Yet getting revenge won't be easy, and Stone will need all the help he can get, including an undercover FBI agent played by Dolph Lundgren, who's already in the inside and who also has his own agenda.
Jack Stone. First a cop, then a cop killer. How long do you think you're gonna last in a place like this?
You see, this place has a way of taking care of problems all on its own.
Gentlemen, my name is Simeon.
If you don't know who Jack Stone is, you better keep it that way.
You and I, we are at war. When a king leaves his throne, he gives his enemies an opportunity to claim it.
This place has been plagued with corruption for years. We didn't know how deep it went.
I know why you're here. You're gonna get yourself killed.
Let's see if you're as good as they say you are.
Before we go further, here is the synopsis that is on IMDb. Cop Jack Stone robs a Russian mob bank to end up in the same prison as the mob boss who killed Jack's wife. An inmate helps him, as does a reporter. Lots of fights. That is the end sentence. Lots of fights. Chris, I'll go to your initial reactions here on this one. What are your thoughts on Riot, man?
I would not really call this a bad movie. It's of these sort of movies where, we're only getting Dolph kind of sold to us as the lead, but then he's really not, and he's just kind of a side character. I think this is kind of on the higher end. It's definitely a movie that looks a lot better if you watch it, say, after Larceny. It definitely improves at that point because I think everything about this production is much more cinematic compared to that movie. So it's kind of dopey. It's not great, but it's watchable. It's halfway decent. I think there's some decent fight choreography, despite the fact that I don't think we'll maybe ever see this Matthew Reese headlining an action movie again. He's just kind of there. He's okay.
Well, I mean, this film is, it's essentially a great big vanity project for Matthew Reese. Okay, he's the lead star. Okay, he's the main character. He plays this cop who gets holed up in prison named Jack Stone. He also serves as a lead producer. He also provides the vocals at the end of the movie for the closing credits song, which is interesting. I don't know if you did or not, but I did kind of have to laugh how his production logo is shown at the very beginning of the movie. Did you notice this?
I didn't notice it. I probably zipped through that. I was only just impressed that it has the whole Universal logo ahead of it. But aside from that, I didn't pay attention to the production company. Apparently, they thought they had a winner with this one.
Wasn't that wild? Yeah. Interestingly, this was acquired by Universal of all companies for a digital DVD and Blu-ray release. They apparently saw some value in this, and they picked this one up and distributed it. That one, I remember when I saw that threw me for a complete loop. That had to make the director of this one, John Lyde, pretty psyched and pretty happy, though, right?
Oh, I bet. I mean, anytime you make one of these movies, and then you can get one of the big five, or I guess big six studios to acquire it, and then you got their logo right in front of it. I mean, it's the same one that appears before the Fast and Furious movies and the Jurassic Park movies and all that good stuff. That's got to be a nice little ego boost.
Well, this was, if we just look at the people behind the scenes on this one, this was directed by John Lyde and written by an individual by the name of Spanky Dustin Ward. What's almost fascinating about these two individuals is how both the director and the writer have extensive work in the worlds of family Christmas films that are put out by Hallmark or whatever. Lyde, in particular, the director of this one, he's done quite a few Christian and religious films. So you watch this particular film, Riot, and there's just something so wacky about seeing this violent prison revenge thriller that is written and directed by two dudes who normally do such wholesome fare. It's almost as if they used this film as their attempt to kind of let loose. You know what I mean? Like this was their Rumspringa, if you will, and then they went back to doing their usual stuff. But they had that one movie where they were like, "Hey, let's just get crazy for once."
Yeah, and I think they do. I mean, there's a lot of funky stuff in this movie. You've got vomiting blood. You've got the great Chuck Liddell doing a Russian accent. There's all kinds of zany things in this movie.
Oh, man. Yeah, well, I have quite a few things to say about Chuck Liddell. Before we get to Chuck Liddell, I don't think that dude should be acting. Why do they keep casting him in movies? No. I don't know.
I mean, he had a name. I mean, these guys who were big in UFC in like the 2000s, they had, between him and Couture and Rampage Jackson, it's like they have a name that's familiar to the kind of people who watch these movies. And so it's kind of like whether they can actually act or not, they were going to be shoved into these movies. And Chuck Liddell's probably of the fighters that I've seen who have made at least a few movies, I mean, he's probably the worst in terms of acting. It's, I don't want to. I mean, I don't know if I would say it directly to his face, but I will say it here in the safety of my own home that he's the worst of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of like what we said earlier, Chuck Liddell, he's a commodity. Okay, you're not getting him for his acting talents. You're really not even getting him for his looks, if you will. You're getting him for his name. Okay, and that name is apparently unlocking doors to get the movie made. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Matthew Reese and you're putting this movie together and you're trying to segue a career into headlining action films, you're going to need some recognizable names with you. And so if you can get Dolph and then you can get Chuck Liddell, well, there's two recognizable names that you can throw up there, and you can Trojan horse yourself as the star of the movie.
Well, and that's exactly what John Lyde said when I spoke with him on a previous episode. Was Chuck Liddell and Dolph, those two names, their presence in this film got the movie made, and not only did they get the movie made, but they got the budget back. Okay, and they were able to provide Mr. Lyde with a nice little check in his pocket, we can say. But if we look at this particular film, I mean, this one, whereas the last one was a fairly basic conceit, if you will, this one, I would argue, is almost even more simplistic in a way. I mean, so we have Jack Stone. This is the Matthew Reese character. It's very, very simplistic, okay? He's a former cop. He purposely gets himself locked up in a prison by robbing a bank. His entire goal was to get into this exact prison where Balaam, this is the character that's played by Chuck Liddell, where Balaam, this is the Russian mob boss who had Stone's wife executed. Okay? Balaam is a prisoner in this place, yet what's interesting is he gets his own luxurious suite, and he has his own private army. He never has to wear prison garb, which I thought was pretty interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We have Matt Reese. He wants to get into the prison so that he can exact revenge on Balaam. What's another interesting fact about this one? I mean, we've seen this premise before, but interestingly, we saw this exact premise done by another movie called Vendetta, where Dean Cain is the Matthew Reese character, and the WWE's Big Show is the Chuck Liddell character. So anyone who likes Riot, you can check out Vendetta, and you're going to get the exact same movie.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. I would say I think Riot is better than Vendetta, but yeah, it's the exact same story, almost scene for scene. But I think Riot is the better of those two. There's just much better fight scenes. I do got to give this movie credit. I think they did try to choreograph some decent melees and decent fight scenes, and they're not bad. They're definitely watchable fight scenes.
Oh, that was one of my notes as well. I think the fight scenes in this film are all surprisingly well choreographed, especially for a movie of this nature. Whereas, I mean, if you look at Larceny, the one we just discussed, Larceny, I mean, those fight scenes, you can almost see the characters stepping back, waiting to get to take their hits, if you will. I mean, they're so lazily choreographed. This one, I don't know what the time in rehearsing these fight scenes were, but I mean, man, they really get down and get dirty in this film. The stunt performers, I mean, they really appear to take these hits in the film that all appear pretty tough. Yeah. And what's really cool about this is I clocked it. There's at least one riot sequence in this film every 15 minutes. So clearly, the title of the film is well-deserved, I think. Yeah,
this is not a case of false advertising in terms of the title. I mean, there are riots, prison riots in this movie, and basically the last 20 minutes is just one massive prison riot. So it's even though maybe they're fibbing a little by having Dolph front and center on the poster, they're not lying by calling this movie Riot. It's an apt title, and nobody can say that there's no rioting in this film.
What they are lying about is, again, if you look at the cover, okay, for the DVD or the Blu-ray of this film, it is Dolph Lundgren square and center with Chuck Liddell in the background. No, that is not the case at all. Yeah. In reality, Dolph plays a supporting character. His character's name is William, who is supposedly this dim-witted inmate, though he's immediately helping out Jack Stone in a few prison brawls. Spoiler, it's later revealed that he's actually an undercover FBI agent who infiltrated the prison to expose just how corrupt the place was. One thing, when I spoke with John Lai, the director of this one, he had basically said that they had Dolph lined up to play another character. I'm assuming, I think it might have been the Chuck Liddell character, but Dolph looked at this and he said, nah, I'd like to do something a little bit different. So the first half of the film, we have Dolph. He's just kind of playing a simpleton, if you will, who just pushes around a mop. But then by the third act, we get to see that that's not really the case. He's actually a badass in hiding.
Yeah, and I think he's good here. It's a fun performance from him. He gets to play kind of the two different aspects of the character. He's got the first half, like you mentioned, where he's just not a very bright guy that everyone kind of takes for granted, and he's just kind of mopping up everywhere. And he kind of inserts himself here and there into some of the fight scenes to help out Stone. But, it's all just kind of makes it look like it's an accident, and he just doesn't really know what's going on. And so I think he's good with those parts of the character, and I think he's good when it's revealed that he's an undercover FBI agent. And, again, of these movies where, he's kind of sold as the lead but isn't really the lead, he's fine in this. I mean, I had a decent time watching him in this movie, and it's certainly a lot better than the usual kind of bait and switch movies that he sometimes has appeared in recent years.
Well, what's funny about it, I don't know, there's a couple things in this film that made me laugh. I can't tell if they were unintentional or not, but once it's revealed to Jack Stone, once Jack Stone realizes who the William character really is, I did find it kind of funny how, okay, so Dolph he's an undercover FBI agent, okay, and I just found it kind of funny that he is perfectly fine with what Stone's doing. I mean, he gives him this long leash, and it's really funny. He's almost kind of cheering on Stone to essentially commit murder. You know, he's kind of like, yeah, I know who you are, and yeah, you go get them. You know, it's like, what? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's. Well, I think he does kind of. I think there is a scene where he kind of mentions how, you know, he's been undercover there for several months, and he's been waiting for somebody to kind of light the fire under this prison that'll really kind of blow the roof off the place. And that's what you are, Stone. You're that guy that's going to help me break this thing wide open. And so, you know, that's basically the purpose that Stone serves. And, you know, his quote unquote vendetta is in terms of going after Chuck Liddell. That's what's going to finally lead to the massive riot that's going to bring the whole prison structure down, you know, with the help of the reporter who, you know, we see every now and again in the film, who's also kind of working to expose the corruption in the prison. So it all kind of comes to a head, and it all kind of makes sense to me. It's not, again, it's to compare it to Larceny. There's really no time in Riot where I'm like, I don't understand why this is happening. Everything kind of goes from A to B to C and makes some sense.
Well, I mean, yes, we have the reporter who's kind of helping things out. There's also another undercover FBI agent who's working in the women's side of the prison. So intercut with the scenes with Matthew Reese mixing it up with the prisoners. There's also apparently a women's prison attached, and so we get random scenes of the women's side of the prison. Mainly a prisoner who goes by the name of Elena. She's played by Danielle C. Ryan. Like you said, she's undercover with the FBI. She's also working with Dolph's William character to kind of expose the corruption that we see in here. Fun fact about her, I actually texted you this. One of this gal's first acting gigs was as Thing 1 in the Cat in the Hat movie with Mike Myers. So quite the diverse role there.
Who would have thunk it, huh? I mean, it's from Thing 1 to Agent Childs. What a stretch. But I thought she was pretty good in the movie. I thought she did perfectly fine as the undercover in the women's prison, and you know, like I had mentioned earlier, you know, she's the character that gets to vomit blood, and you know, she does a pretty good. In fact, it almost felt like in the middle of this movie I feel like there was like a 15-minute stretch where the movie's about her, and you're not even really seeing Stone. Like, Stone kind of disappears, and it basically just becomes the Agent Childs movie. So again, I guess it's just padding the runtime, making sure they get at least close to that 90 minutes, because it really kind of felt to me like it was her movie for a little while.
Well, the Stone character, Matt Reese, how many lines of dialogue would you say he gets in this entire film? Maybe 8? 9?
It's probably more than that, but yeah, it's very very minimalistic dialogue from the great Matthew Reese.
The great Matthew Reese, yes. Dolph gets. I mean, you already mentioned it, but this was another note that I wrote down that really just I was dying with laughter. So at the end of the movie, okay, after the big riot has ceased and everything like that, Dolph does get a funny line at the end of the film where, he tells Jack Stone that Balaam also killed his partner years prior, and that Dolph could never figure out a way to get to Balaam. And then he says, this is his exact line in the film. He says, "No one's ever had the balls to do what you did." And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, William, you're in the FBI, and clearly you didn't either. So,
yeah. Well, that's true. That is very true. I mean, Dolph could have handled business a lot sooner, but I guess he was so dedicated to his undercover work as William that he was not going to crack. He was going to keep mopping those floors for as long as it took, and it wasn't until Stone came in that he finally had his key to bringing down the corruption in the prison.
Well, I'm glad. You know what? Hey, Chris, I'm glad that you liked one more than the other. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think was this your first time seeing Riot as well?
No, I had seen this when it initially came out, and it's like I kind of had the same reaction. I didn't think it was terrible. I mean, I didn't think it was great. It was mildly entertaining. I think there are some sequences that are really good. I really like when Stone is in the prison guard outfits, the outfits that they kind of look like they took them from the guards in Escape Plan. It's kind of like the same kind of outfit, but when he's in one of those outfits during the riot and he's getting into all kinds of fights, I mean, I think that's a pretty cool sequence, and there are some good moments in this movie. I mean, there's some stuff that you kind of roll your eyes to, and you kind of wonder, oh man, like all the flashbacks to the bank heist that lands Stone in prison. There's some pretty bad muzzle flash work during those scenes that kind of takes me out of it. But for the most part, it's an entertaining enough movie. It's meat and potatoes. You know what you're going to get. And it does deliver on that front. It's definitely not great. It's not one that I'd probably be looking to watch as much as some of the better Dolph movies that I've seen. But it's perfectly fine, low budget prison action entertainment.
So, okay, I mean, thank you again. If we look at Larceny, though, going back to that one real quick, it sounds like, okay, with obviously Riot, I like what you said about how it's meat and potatoes, very simplistic. If we look at Larceny, though, okay, again, revisiting the whole Dolph in a prison environment, if you will, why does Larceny not get a recommend from you as a film?
Well, I'll tell you. Let me do this. I'm going to compare a really specific moment that happens in both Riot and Larceny, and that will kind of explain why I dislike Larceny so much. So in each of these movies, there is a scene where Dolph's character is on a higher level of the prison and tosses another character over. So in Larceny, he tosses the character over. The guy just falls. You barely see it. It's just he falls. You hear kind of a thud. In Riot, he tosses the guy over, and there's a really cool bounce off of one of the tables on the lower level, and there's like some actual thought put into those 3 seconds of film, and that's why I think Riot is so much better, and that's why I think Larceny is so much worse. Is with Larceny, it just feels like there's no thought that was put into any of the scenes, that it's all just being done to just get to the next scene. Let's crank this out. Let's get it over with. Let's film a couple guys shooting machine guns. Let's film a couple guys in a prison cell, and let's just move on and let's just go home. And with Riot, it just feels like there is an effort to make an entertaining movie. And even if it doesn't succeed 100%, it succeeds enough to be a vastly superior movie to something like Larceny.
Well, hopefully this is the last time we see Mr. Lundgren put on prison attire and step into a prison set for a film. But Chris, again, kind of like what I said with when we discussed the Serafini trifecta, I do appreciate you sitting down to watch two films that may have not been super high on your list, but the fact that you did it, I really appreciate. Once again, you've jumped a grenade for me, so I thank you wholeheartedly.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. Even when the movies are bad, it's still a joy to talk to them, to talk to you about them. So it's a little bit of pain for a whole lot of pleasure of getting to relive the excitement of these movies over again.
Well, and again, I mean, shoot, we have a few more that are ripe for some combo episodes. We have Forgotten, we have Hard Night Falling. What else is there? Acceleration, the Tracker. We've established it. I mean, hey,
it's the combo. It's the wave of the future. The trifecta and the combo.
Well, Chris, till next time, this has been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything that you want to give a shout out to? Anything that you want to plug? I know that you don't have a respective podcast per se, but here's your moment. Okay, you've suffered through these for me. What's going on, man?
Oh, I don't really have anything to plug. I do appear every now and again on a podcast. It's the Framework podcast. So I appear on there every now and again. I talk a lot about Sopranos. We do a lot of episodes about different seasons of The Sopranos, and I've been on there for some other reasons. So I think, anyone just look up Framework on where you listen to your podcasts, and you'll be able to find that. So that's about all I really have to plug.
All right. Well, thank you. To everyone out there who is listening, please feel free to rate and review the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever else you go to subscribe. We always appreciate the reviews, and we'll see you all next time on I Must Break This Podcast.
And though we stand carefully playing for me to meet you hand in hand. The time has come, the stage is set. What's about to happen, you will never forget. You can't hide, the devil's gonna take you. My time, my turns, I win, you burn. For the last time, it's going down. I'll find you, it's my town. I'm empty, I'm cold, my anger, control. Think it's over, dead wrong. Sit tight, this is all you. It's crashing down overhead. You took my world, you left me for dead. Ooh, no, I can't feel anymore. I'll take you down to the floor. I'm gonna break you in a million pieces. You can't hide, the devil's gonna take you. My time, my turn, I win, you burn. For the last time, it's going down. I'll find you, it's my town. I'm empty, I'm cold, my anger, control. Think it's over, dead wrong. Sit tight, this is all you. My time, my terms, I win, you burn. For the last time, it's going down. I'll find you, it's my town.